So I'm so glad that Dr. Brightsmith is with us today. I've had the great pleasure of being with him in several different South American and Central American countries, and he is a top-notch scientist, biologist, conservationist. I probably got some of those terminologies wrong, Don. Hopefully you'll correct me. But he's been doing this a really long time, and he's super smart. And I love the topic he's going to be talking about today because wild parrots have come to America. So thank you for being here. And we so appreciate everything you do. And hopefully we'll have some time at the end to talk about some of your many other projects, which are also equally valuable. So I'm going to turn it over to you. And thanks again to everybody for being here.
Thanks, Anne, and thanks to Phoenix Landing for providing me a place to chat with you today. Really looking forward to it. So today I'll be talking about naturalized parrots, but as Anne said, at the end there should be some time to chat about some of the other work that we're doing. As the Macaw Society, if you're a Facebooker type, you can find the Macaw Society at Facebook and follow us, and then Gabby and I will keep you informed of all the different things that we're trying to keep up with. So thanks, everyone. And today I'll be talking about a very specific part of the work I've done over the past few years. With the topic being naturalized parrots, is the sky really falling? And a lot of this work was done in conjunction with Simon Kais, a graduate student of mine who's now working in the lower Rio Grande Valley on parrots and other fun things. So the talk is based on a chapter from a recent book, and the book is Naturalized Parrot Distribution, Ecology, and Impacts of the World's Most Colorful Colonizers. Simon and I wrote 2 different chapters, and the book is set up with 18 chapters with background in ecology and then a bunch of different case studies. It's a really cool book. It has lots of different, what we would call perspectives. And the reason that I was invited to write some chapters is because the lead author and editor is, his name just escaped me, Henry Pruitt-Jones. He's worked with monk parakeets in Chicago, and he likes the birds. But unfortunately, a lot of the people who write about this are not so keen on their existence out in the wild. And he actually asked me to write a chapter, in part because he said, I want somebody to take kind of a more balanced view, or not necessarily start out with a negative view of them. So he charged me with that, and I did my best as a level-headed scientist who also happens to like parrots to say, okay, how bad is this? Is this something where the world really is, the sky's falling and we're just destroying, these birds are destroying the ecosystems they get into? Or is this something that's got a little more play in it and it's a little more subtle than that? So it's one of the hardest things I had to work on. I cited over 250 papers in these 2 chapters that we wrote, and it was a lot of work. If you ever think about the difficulty of proving a negative, that means you have to look for every little corner to make sure nobody's found bad impacts. So proving a negative turned out to be challenging. So let's see what we find. Okay, so all this work and all this book, what does it show us? Parrots are naturalized. So what's naturalized means? Well, there's a lot of words out there. There's introduced, there's non-native, there's invasive, there's mean and dirty. There's lots of different ways that you can talk about animals that aren't in the place where they naturally occurred. So, but naturalized in this case means they're in a place that's outside their native range, and they've bred, and to the point where they're actually established and the populations are self-sustaining. So it's not like somebody's cockatoo got out in Canada and is flying around. That's not a naturalized parrot. That's an escapee. And come winter, if it doesn't get caught, it probably won't make it. But monk parakeets down here in Texas, in Florida, where the populations are doing really well and expanding, that's a naturalized population. So and it's a very non-judgmental word. And I think that's why he chose it as the title for the book, because he didn't want to write a book about invasive parrots or ruining the world. So he tried to go as non-judgmental as possible, but also leaving open the possibility that in fact they are causing trouble, or they're not. Two of the species are really successful. Here in the United States, it's monk or Quakers. Quaker parakeets or Quaker parrots or monk parakeets are the most common non-native parrot in our country. But the rest of the world is the most dominant one is the ringneck parakeet, Psittacula krameri, or the Indian ringneck. And there are lots of those in different parts of the world, including Northern Europe. Most of the times that parrots end up in places where they're not native to, it's because they were moved for the pet trade. And some data on that, 80% of the 300 cases that were studied in the study I'm presenting here, were known to be related to birds moving for the pet trade. Now, when we move, parrots are common in parts of the United States. When you look at our big databases of bird sightings, and this is as of a couple years ago, the Christmas bird count and eBird, there are over 120,000 observations of parrots in the United States. So that's quite a few. Parrots are not a rarity in the United States anymore. There's lots of places where you can go and see them. And in that same database, 56 species have been cited in 43 different states. So it gives you an idea that there's some pretty reasonable coverage. Florida, California, and Texas are top with 22,000 to 39,000 observations. And as far as breeding goes, there are 25 species that have been seen as breeding across 23 different states. If we look at what this looks like, you can see South Texas. So this is the number of species. The closer to yellow it gets, the more species they are. Dade County, Florida, Miami area, that one wins with as many as 36 species there. Southern California, another classic area for parrots. You can see quite a few species in there. South Texas, and then a smattering throughout the rest of the country. A lot of times that smattering is mostly monk parakeets. Well, a few other interesting ones over in Arizona as well. Maximum 36 species seen in Dade County. Yeah, it's fun. Even bird feeders in Dade County, Florida can get really interesting. I've had pyras show up. I was at a conference and knocked on a hollow dead palm tree, and breeding blue and yellow macaws came out. Yeah, it's fun. I don't know if anybody does parrot tours down there, but there certainly is some opportunity down there for seeing some cool birds. In the US, the monk parakeet's the most common. About 40% of all the sightings of parrots in the US are of monk parakeets. They're first showing up in the 1960s, and breeding populations have been established in 21 different states. Here you can see the Chicago birds that Pruitt-Jones has worked with, the New York metropolitan area. Florida has just massive numbers, and then there's quite a few throughout Texas. Globally, parrots have been introduced. The very first record was from 1615, with over 3,500 of records of parrot introductions. 1616, somebody moved the red shining parrot to Tonga Island. But then most of them have been things like monk parakeets, etc. Globally, the 1980s, 1960s, 70s, and 80s were really the peak of when these birds were being moved around and allowed to escape. But then from the 90s on, the numbers have gone down quite a bit, suggesting that there are less wild parrots being moved around globally. In the United States, the number of birds that were being imported to the United States, as you can see, before 1990, there were some really large numbers, 300,000 or more individual wild parrots being brought in. Then in 1992, or was approximately, the Wild Bird Conservation Act was passed. And after that, the numbers of parrots being imported into the United States dropped a great deal. because wild-caught parrots actually know what it means to be a parrot and fly around outside and eat wild foods, it's much easier for wild-caught parrots to establish in the wild. So upon escape, a lot of your captive bred, think of your favorite pet and how kind of needy they are. They don't necessarily do well if they get out. So once the wild bird importations dropped off, the number of establishments and new populations dropped off as well. Where there are wild parrots still allowed to be imported, you get more establishment of new populations. And right now, to our south, Mexico has, as far as I know, this may have changed recently, but as far as I know, they're still importing wild-caught parrots. Although I have a feeling that people are fighting against that now as well. Now, this is always an issue among the Phoenix landing types, the parrot owners, those who share their homes with parrots. That's probably a good way of saying it, or whose furniture is eaten by parrots might be a way of saying it as well. But a number of populations have been targeted for control, and I don't know if you guys, it doesn't look like you guys are allowed to speak, but maybe you could type into the chat. What's a synonym for control in this world of euphemisms that we live? There we go, kill. So if something is targeted for control, it usually means that they're going to kill you. Oh, wow, death and murder. I was just going for kill, but that works for me. Among parakeets, USA, the United Kingdom, Spain, Indian ringnecks are in Hawaii. Spain, Seychelles, New Zealand. Rainbow lorikeets, I think that Rosemary Lowe wrote an article about that. There it is, Rainbow Lorikeet, A Modern Witch Hunt by Rosemary Lowe. Mitchard parakeets as well. If you see some numbers over here in Spain, and these aren't even recent, there are populations of over 10,000 monk parakeets in some areas. So people have gotten kind of freaked out about this. So what leads people to, well, society to decide that we need to go out there and control? Yes, Kansas, we'll get to that. What drives the decision to remove these naturalized parrots? And this is where it started to get interesting for me, because I really dug into this literature trying to understand what was really happening. And there are real impacts. There's ecological impacts, there are economic impacts, and there are social impacts. But then there are what I'm calling perceived impacts, which are ecological, economic, social, and probably want to throw disease in there under social. And there's a difference between what's real and what we think, or we suspect, or we worry about. But unfortunately, these are often mixed in both the scientific writing and the popular press in order to make this really strong case that we've got to get rid of these animals. And here's like a classic book, 100 of the world's worst invasive alien species. So just getting out there. So the campaigns that are actually successful and fully eliminate naturalized parrots are really rare. And look at the key word in both of these is island. Gran Canaria Island, they removed ringneck parakeets, and in the Seychelles, they removed ringneck parakeets. The key there is island. Small areas that have an edge and you can find all of the birds. So those are like the only two places I could find where anybody was actually successful in getting rid of these critters. So the campaigns that are actually successful, that eliminate populations, usually have certain characteristics. They originate with complaints from the local people. So the local people say, look, our agriculture is being damaged, or for some other reason, they say, these birds are causing us problems. Then there's a dialogue between the people and the government. The local people are involved, and this campaign is then supported by the local people. And you put out a poster like this. It says, have you seen this bird? And people report, and in that way you can track them down, and the birds are usually controlled, eliminated, removed. However, it's much more common for parrot eradication campaigns not to work. It costs a lot, they're unpopular, and don't successfully eliminate the species. And I loved this article. I pulled the headline, "Is there really space on our hate list for parakeets?" And this is a people who were Brits who were getting a petition signed to stop controlling monk parakeets. And I don't know if that, I assume that was their pet monk parakeet that's sitting on the clipboard. So some of the characteristics of these failed attempts is the managers sometimes try and hide their actions from local people, like literally going out at night, going around neighborhoods where the neighbors didn't know about it, catching or shooting parrots in areas where right near people's houses.
I think we lost your audio.
Okay, how about now?
You're back.
Okay, I fiddled. So managers, this can cause a backlash if we have these control efforts going on when local people don't even have an idea. And in the northeastern US, I think it was people out of Brooklyn, New York, they identified the birds. Both the birds and us were immigrant communities. We weren't born here, we were brought here. So we get this idea of the people starting to actually bond with the birds in certain ways, and that really inhibits the ability for governments to remove them. And in some instances, local people may actually take action against the campaigns. They won't allow the elimination crews to go onto their land. They may challenge them in court. They may sponsor legal protection action to protect the birds. So you get into all sorts of conflicts. And here we go, Kansas. Fears of naturalized parrots can drive restrictions on parrot ownership. This was made in 2019, and it may have moved a little bit. I'm sure you can find some errors on here somewhere, but it gives you an idea where it's illegal to or restricted the ownership of monk parakeets. And this is because these states are worried that they'll get out, they'll become established, and they will cause damage to something. What that something is would be determined on a state-by-state basis. So as I got into this process, most of what I just told you, I pretty much knew before I got started, with a few details. So I wanted to step back, and I was like, first of all, how large is the threat to biodiversity from naturalized species? And the more I read, the more I realized that, okay, we have two really different ways of looking at this issue. There's what I call the high impact perspective, or the cautionary perspective. So with a precautionary perspective, we say, this could cause a problem, and because it could possibly cause a problem, it's better off to just get rid of it. So it's not native, it shouldn't be here. Look at all these possible ways that could be impacting us. Let's do everything we can to get rid of them. And then there's this other perspective that thinks about in a more lower and variable impact. And there it's what we call the mitigation perspective. And with that, it's kind of an idea, it's a mentality of, if this thing looks like it's going to cause a problem and is really worth the effort, then we should go out and we should do something about it, and we should take it out. But if it's just going to be there, make a little noise, fly around, be green, and not really impact anything, what's the point of going out and investing all this money and effort in taking them out? So these are the two perspectives that I'll be talking about today. The precautionary perspective, non-native species of many types threaten biodiversity, plants, bacteria, fungi, mammals, reptiles, amphibians, birds, etc. It's been reported that invasive species are the #2 threat to ecosystems globally. The only thing that's a bigger threat is habitat loss. It has greater impacts than hunting and poaching combined. And on islands, it's reported to be the #1 threat to biodiversity. This is not talking about parrots. This is talking about all non-native species. And if you prescribe to this, then all non-native species should be targets for removal as a precaution as quickly as you can, no matter what happens. If it's not native, get it out. And that's kind of what's going on with this precautionary perspective. However, when we think about kind of a mitigation perspective, a lot of times these impacts aren't really backed up by scientific evidence, and they're just like, well, it's not native, so we got to do something about it. Well, mitigation perspectives actually think of it more like, with how many people are flying around the world, with how much cargo is going from China to the United States, to from here to there, moving plants across the world, et cetera. Naturalized species are kind of considered under this perspective as an inevitable consequence of how we run our world right now. And because of that, as managers, people who actually are on the ground worrying about this, they really, the mentality is much more of, we should really only control the invasive species with the largest negative impacts. And some people will advocate, hey, if it's not causing damage, just leave it there. It's not important. And others to the point of, forget about it. We've lost this. Let's focus on protecting habitats. Let's focus on other things, because it's really hard to win the war on invasive species. But which one's right? They're both right. They're just different ways of looking at it, and have different repercussions when it comes to management. So next thing I had to do, what are the scientists doing when they write about this? Well, there's some scientific reviews have been done of the impacts. Most of the writers who write about these non-native parrots really have a high impact or a mitigation perspective, a high impact perspective. And the starting point is that non-native species are negative and should be controlled. And that's where most of these people are writing from. So as they write, most of them are just really trying to justify that conclusion that naturalized parrots are causing trouble. And when they present their results, it's really bizarre. Some people, good scientists and people working out of the European Union, they don't really put their results in context. They're not compared to other threats. Financial costs are not really factored in. And I just kept feeling like every time I'd read an article like by these guys, I was like, wow, this is overstated. Wow, that's overstated. Wow, this is really overstated. And these previous reviews suggest really large impacts. But what bothered me was that as I was reading their papers, I couldn't figure out which of what they're saying is a confirmed impact, where we know that this is happening, or it's something we suspect is happening, but don't really have good data on, a probable or a possible impact, and which ones are theoretically possible, but there's no evidence at all from anywhere on the planet that it's happening. And what happens was these guys would mix this type of information together, and by the time you finished reading the paper, you were deathly scared. Like if you walked outside and saw a parakeet sitting on your lawn, you'd be like, oh my God, I have to sterilize the lawn. And so it was just kind of scary. And these reviews suggested that the parrots are having these big impacts on ecosystems, economy, and human well-being. And what bothered me now is that these dialogues, these writings were really driving the national level dialogue for management decisions. And this was a really good quote from a guy by the name of Menchetti, who's written a whole bunch of these papers. Naturalized parakeets have begun to exert serious problems to native environments, wildlife, and humans. And when a PhD scientist working out of a university who's been funded to do research on these comes out with that type of conclusion, damn, it's time to act. Get out your shotguns and lock and load, and let's have at them. And that was kind of where we were coming from. And he wrote an article in that book. So if you get the book, you can read one of these and be like, really? So we decided to go at it. Okay, let's take that. Let's respect that perspective and leave it where it is. And now let's do our own. We didn't start with the assumption that they were the big bad wolf. Bad. No, wolves are good. Sorry. We should start with the assumption that they're having big negative impacts. Instead, let's focus on the two different types of evidence. What's confirmed? Let's find what really happened, where they've really caused trouble. And then let's move to what's likely. And unfortunately, we looked at the scientific literature, and then we had to look at reports and other gray literature, like anything that's buried in the deepest, darkest corners of the internet. And I'm just not going to go out and give a lot of weight to things that are possible, but have no evidence, or the ones that are even unlikely. So here's the type of headline that supports kind of that side. Study finds exotic parrots aren't impacting native bird populations in South Florida. Oh my gosh, imagine that. Methods for ecological impacts analysis. We looked at, are they actually impacting populations? Now, if you have a native bird on your bird feeder and a parakeet comes in and scares it off, that to me doesn't count. That is not an impact on that population. The bird feeder is artificial to start with. A bird house is an artificial thing to start with, so competition over those probably isn't the end of the world. And then we really wanted to provide some context by comparing documented impacts of these birds to documented impacts of other invasive species. And here's a good questioning headline: California parrots, pleasure or problem? We searched for 5 types of ecological impacts: competition with native species, disease transmission, hybridization, herbivory, meaning destroying your local trees, not that parrots destroy anything, or any other impacts. Competition. Competition with native species is most likely for nesting cavities. As many of you know, most of our parrots nest in tree cavities, except for our monks, or food. And lots of people have studied this topic. Lots and lots of people have been looking for this. Many species document fights at bird feeders with native species, but nobody's been able to go on from that and show that there are actually less native birds because parakeets fight with them at bird feeders. So, not too strong of an evidence there. But when I looked, I found one. It's called greater nocturnal bats. They're listed as vulnerable to extinction in Europe. There's a large populations that exist in Sevilla, Spain, and some other places in Spain, but actually in urban parks. But the ringneck parakeets apparently remove the bats from the tree cavities, and many bats apparently get killed, and Europe's largest population has declined by about 80%. So this seemed to be a true aspect of, hey, this is a problem in this case. We also found that ringneck parakeets compete with Eurasian nuthatches for nest sites. This competition may have caused a 10% reduction in population in Belgium, but when they looked for it in England, they couldn't find it there. There are also some evidence that they will compete for nesting sites with scops owls, lesser kestrels, Italian sparrows, swifts, upus. That's an upu. I love upus. Also are likely to compete for nest sites with studies out of Europe and Israel. But again, in all of these cases, there was no evidence that the populations were actually dropping, even though there was some competition. This is one of these possible ones. The ringneck parakeets may have contributed to decline of echo parakeets, but the main thing that caused the echo parakeets in Mauritius to have problems is habitat loss. But they were introduced, the ringneck parakeets, and there has been competition for cavities, but even the research that's been going on for a very long time really can't put a nail in the coffin on this one. The evidence just isn't overly convincing, but it's very possible. So I'm willing to put this forward as, yeah, this is something we should be worried about. Read the articles if you can stand it. I mean, they're very annoying, the wrong perspective. But you'll read articles in the popular and in the science. They're a threat to human and animal health because they spread disease. And it's like, okay. Some pigeons in Europe have mites apparently spread from monk parakeets. But again, these are urban pigeons that are interacting with urban parakeets. One bald eagle chick died from chlamydia in a nest where monk parakeets were nesting in the bottom of the nest. But there was no evidence that the monk parakeets had chlamydia. But is it possible? Yes. But again, no population impacts documented from either one of these. Psittacine beak and feather disease and ringnecks. It's found in native and naturalized population on Mauritius and the Seychelles Islands. There was an echo parakeet outbreak in Mauritius that could have been linked to ringneck parakeets. Once again, the data is inconclusive. And what they think actually is they were holding ringneck parakeets and echo parakeets in captivity at the same time. And then the echoes were released. So there's that possibility as well. So again, can we do, and that was part of the research for the conservation. So that could have been a problem. So again, data inconclusive. On the Seychelles Islands, one of the reasons they eliminated the ringnecks was because of the lesser vasa parrots that are out there. They wanted to make sure that there was no disease spread. So they had an ecological reason for doing a removal of those birds, small island population. Okay. And there are a possibility of threats of moving these diseases to other parrots. But again, not a lot of silver bullet or last nail in the coffin showing that the released parakeets, the naturalized parakeets, were the cause of the problem. And this is the one that kills me. There is no evidence from anywhere in the world that any person has ever caught a disease from a naturalized parrot population. Many of you may have touched, hugged, kissed, and rubbed a parrot in your life. I don't know. I don't know if we can raise hands to show how many of you've done that, but with this as a Phoenix landing group, I imagine a few of you have. But with these naturalized parrots, people just aren't interacting with them like that. Yes, thank you, Anne. Aren't interacting with them like that. And there is no evidence from anywhere in the world that a naturalized parrot has ever given a disease to a person. But yet I still read newspaper articles that say they're a disease risk to human beings. And that to me just isn't fair because it's just not true. So they're just lying to make the point that to demonize these little critters. Spread of disease or parasites from naturalized parakeets have likely occurred. So when we step back and look at disease, yes, there's probably some disease or parasites that have been moved from naturalized parrots to other birds, but there isn't any evidence of population declines, and it's not very common. And then saying in a newspaper article that these are a threat to people for disease reasons doesn't fly. At least for me, it doesn't fly. And I know there's a lot of people out there looking for this, and maybe someday they'll find evidence of it. But some of you may have seen hybrid parrots in captivity. So as we know, many parrots are capable of hybridizing. And this can threaten native species by reducing or eliminating them through hybridization. The worries is if naturalized parrot hybridize with rare local species, that rare local species could actually become technically extinct because they're no longer purebreds flying around. And that's a legitimate concern. This is a picture of a lilac crowned paired with what's probably a lilac crowned yellow-headed hybrid out of South Texas, taken by Simon. So there are naturalized parrots that are hybridizing out in the wild for certain. Red crowned Amazons in South Texas are considered native by the state of Texas. The population's likely a mix of escapees and perhaps a couple that flew up over the Mexican border, and they've been known to hybridize with red lord, lilac crowned, and yellowheads, and about 2% of the population may be hybrid individuals. They will also hybridize outside their native ranges, blue-fronted, red crowns, lilac crowns, both in the USA and Europe, ringnecks and Alexandrine, parakeets hybridize in Spain. A variety of the psittacaras are known on Telegraph Hill to hybridize and in Hawaii. So there's a lot of evidence that especially when you have naturalized parrots that are out, obviously away from their native ranges, they may hook up with other species and hybridize. But hybridization with naturalized parrots has not had impacts on any truly native parrot populations that we can tell. The only native population with hybrids is in South Texas, but we don't think that they're overly native. And Simon, since I made this talk, has done a cool analysis of it is possible that these groups of parrots in South Texas may turn into a hybrid swarm over time if they don't choose their own types a little bit better. So there may be a lot of hybridization over the decades as it's happening. But one other thing, the echo parakeets and ringneck parakeets that are really closely related haven't hybridized in the wild. So far, really true native populations haven't been impacted by hybridization yet. So that was pretty cool. Yes, love the one you're with. That's yeah, it happens in jail too. So yes, that's a good comment out of the chat there. Naturalized parrots are not having important impacts on native plants or ecosystem structure. Parrots like to chew and strip branches in some areas for certain. Maybe a couple favorite trees might die, but they're not denuding landscapes by eating the trees. So that impact, even though it's been brought up in the literature, there just isn't any evidence of beyond maybe few favorite roost trees may get hammered. But again, not a population impact. So when we look at the ecology, and this is going across the whole world, this is 250 bloody papers that I could find at the time, there's really only two clear evidence of population impacts on native species. We talked about the giant nocturnal bat and maybe some population, something happening in European nuthatches. And then we have to recognize that echo parakeets and ringnecks probably aren't a great combination. So not ideal there, as there's the possibility of impacts there. But no other populations of naturalized parrots have confirmed negative impacts on native populations. That's 50 parrot species in hundreds of populations all across the world. Not a big impact yet. I'm worried about islands. And yeah, maybe I'm going a little bit beyond my own science here, but islands with rare endemic parrots may be at higher risk. No impacts confirmed, but extra caution is warranted. Seychelles Islands, Vasas, Puerto Rican Amazons, Uvea parakeets, etc. Probably better to not be pumping out a lot of non-native parrots into islands that are occupied by these animals. That would be what I would say. But when we roll it back, there's a fundamental reason why these parrots aren't having more impact on native populations. Most naturalized parrots inhabit strictly urban and suburban environments. Think about that map I showed you: Chicago, New York, Miami, Los Angeles. South Texas is almost an exception, but they're in the urban areas in South Texas. We've studied that really well. San Francisco. Those are the types of habitats these non-native parrots like. And guess what? There's not that many at-risk populations of native species in the middle of downtown Los Angeles, but there's a lot of parrots. Same with Miami. So there's just not as many chances for them to overact there. And for that reason, they're not trashing the big national parks and the really pristine habitats outside the cities. Let's put this in perspective. Remember, I said let's put this in perspective. So perspective, naturalized parrots have relatively few impacts on native species. If we look at the IUCN Red List, this is like the global endangered species list. 1,312 species of birds and mammals are threatened by non-native species. So that's a lot, but this is all native species together. We found impacts on a maximum 3 species, only 2 of which are threatened. So of all the species threatened by non-native critters, parrots are responsible for 0.15%. Does this seem like a major impact? I'll give you a hint, it's no. So yes, not really among the leading impacts on threatened species globally. So just a small issue when it comes to ecological impacts. Money. Everybody's always worried about money. Economic impacts. So now we got to go back to the literature, search through all of it, and figure out what were the what were the impacts on agriculture, on electrical infrastructure, buildings, airplanes, etc. Here it is. What to do with the parakeets, the invasive species. They've arrived to stay. They're here to stay. Parrot agriculture, damage to agriculture has been widely reported. For those of you who follow it, this is the Lear's macaw eating corn. These are monk parakeets in a cornfield as well. But most of the damage to agriculture has actually been reported from areas where parrots are native. And there is evidence that they'll do it in a naturalized area, but there's not a lot. And it looks, from my looking, it looks like a lot of times these claims may be exaggerated and the true costs aren't estimated very often. So let's see what we can come up with. According to my research, well, everybody else's research that I read, naturalized monk parakeets and ringneck parakeets do some agricultural damage. In Florida, there was an orchard where they lost 20 to 60% of their crop. They estimated it as a $15,000 loss. Corn crops in Barcelona can lose up to a third. Orchard in Barcelona can anywhere from 10% to maybe 35%. Tomatoes in Barcelona, maybe $11,000 annual loss. Ringneck parakeets, grapevines in the UK, 8,000. Pick your own farm in the UK, 15% loss, 3,000. This one kind of annoyed me. The dates fruits in Israel, they claimed a $250,000 loss, but that number was just thrown out by owners and wasn't really, there was no science that I could see that had backed that one up. Yeah, one reported loss in Florida. I'm sure there's more. It's how many of them make it to the literature, but still not. Now, the big one that I have seen recently, and the one that there seems to be some fight going on about, there are about 10, and this is a few years old, there's probably more, 10,000 live on Kauai Island. There may be an estimated $2 million in damage to corn. Dow and large companies growing GMO seed corn out in Hawaii, and thousands of dollars in damage to local orchards at 30% losses in some cases. Most of these cases, the farmers don't get reimbursed, but I don't know if there's and that's going to vary by location, if there's kind of a farmer's insurance or not. So in the case of Hawaii, the local people and large industry are both complaining, and somebody went out. I actually talked to a researcher who was working in this system. And when the researcher went out to try and document the impacts, she was pretty much already convinced that they were causing trouble. The local people were asking, why are you studying them? Just go start killing them. However, and I don't know if this has changed, but I have seen no quantification of damage other than what local people and big companies are saying this is the cost of the damage from these birds. And there is a control campaign that's been ongoing for the last few years. Of published things that were out there, we found less than 10 cases globally of published agriculture damage by naturalized parrots. And what's most interesting about this is that there were no damages to large-scale industrial agriculture. So, like, go back to Kansas for you. When you're driving through massive cornfields, you're not getting flocks of parrots coming down out of the skies by the thousands and decimating tens of thousands of acres of corn. Only 5 cases was the damage quantified. Most losses were only $3,000 to $15,000. And then there's some of these other large ones that numbers are being thrown around, but not much for quantification on that. But what the key take-home message here was, remember that I said that these birds really like agriculture. They really like urban areas. So what happened was all of the damage that I could find in the literature was within 4 kilometers of urban centers, and where the urban centers had large parrot populations. So what this means is that these birds are not going out into massive large-scale agriculture and attacking it. They're going out from their cities, relatively short distances, and impacting the plants that they're finding around it. So is our food supply as a nation likely to be damaged by parakeets? For me, the answer is no. If you run a snazzy little pick your own farm on the outskirts of London or Charlotte, North Carolina, or whatever, and there's a big parrot population, you could have some troubles. So there certainly are options there that could cause trouble. If we change our focus a bit, infrastructure damage, monk parakeets and electrical systems. How many of you have people seen the monk parakeets up on the electrical structures? It's really fun to watch, but they do cause trouble. If they build a dense enough nest around a transformer and that transformer can't cool, they can burst into flames. We helped foster a monk parakeet named Smokey, who when he came to Texas A&M still smelled of smoke because his nest burst into flames and he probably jumped out or something like that. So these then fires in transformers cause power outages. And nesting and damage is common in many parts of the US, Florida, Connecticut, Texas, Illinois, New York, all report power outages due to monk parakeets. But for some reason that I don't think anybody has an idea of, in some areas, the monk parakeets don't nest in electrical systems. Spain, Israel, Puerto Rico, big populations, but they don't nest around electrical systems. Don't have a clue on what's up with that one. Confirmed damage by nesting monk parakeets. Removing nests, $500,000 out of a company in Florida. And then somewhere between a half to $1 million, another one in Florida. Connecticut, $70,000 per year. New York, 18 fires caused by monk parakeets, and the damage was not quantified. So $1 million is a lot of money. And then that starts, now you're starting to think, okay, maybe we've got a problem here. We should be doing something about $1 million. Until you think about a power grid. The authors don't estimate damages to infrastructure from other sources or overall maintenance costs. None report annual profits of the company. So that number of $1 million was put in the literature with no context whatsoever. So Brightsmith, being a pain in the neck, decided, hey, let's try and find some context from that. So I went and I looked for some financial reports. $585,000 in damage in highly impacted parts of Florida. That sounds pretty difficult. The profits for that company in that year were reported at $871 million. That parakeet caused a drop in earnings of about 0.067%, or about 15 cents per share. Is that a lot of money? I don't know. I don't care. But that provides some perspective. Yeah, squirrels. I wish that I saw the numbers from squirrels, and I haven't found that, but squirrels would just be insane, I'm sure, the amount of damage they cause. But when you think about it, is eradicating parakeets worth 15 cents per share? Is it a problem if it's causing a 0.067% reduction in profit in earnings? And that's a decision for other people to make. But let's not talk about $500,000. Let's talk about 0.067%. And I think that that's when we start to really put things in the balance and try and understand, should we be going out there and get rid of these birds or not? Or should we be trapping more squirrels and maybe save 5%? So if we summed all the costs of naturalized parrots in the United States from the literature, we find 1.6 million per year nationwide. And the total cost from all invasive species combines $120 billion, with rats at 19 billion, cats at 17 billion, feral pigs at 800 million. Now we start to ask the question of, how much does it cost to have parakeets in the ecosystem? And parakeets are responsible for only 0.0013% of the total damage caused by invasive species in the United States. Go to the UK. Another good report looking at things across the board. 0.0048% of the damage done by invasive species. So if we're going to prioritize removing non-native species, should parakeets top that list? I just put the numbers out there. The decisions are up to you. Doesn't look so bad. Oh yeah, plant invaders. Yeah, and this is not even talking about plants, and plants can cause way more trouble. So now we're up to social impacts. Negatives. This was a farmer in Hawaii on the top right. Negative social impacts, power outages, noise, feces, damage to backyard fruits. They are unpopular with some residents. But then we have positive social impacts. And I imagine a lot of you listening to me are thinking about, God, I wish I had parrots at my bird feeder. And so do my wife and I, to be honest. And I would never release parrots into non-native areas, but if they happen to show up at my bird feeder, I would be more than happy to feed them. Some people just love parrots. Birds are relatively easy to see and hear. And there is this idea, and it's repeated multiple times in the literature, that having a bright, green, noisy bird in a place like New York, Los Angeles, Miami may actually help connect residents with nature. Now, it's not the nature that's always been there. That's not nature that necessarily should be there, but it is nature. It is getting them to look up from their telephones and acknowledge that there are other creatures that share our planet with us. And as I said, people will often fight to protect their local parrot populations, to protect this version of urban nature. Is the sky falling? Usually not. There are a few places where there's some big hailstones coming down and some damage is being done. But for the most part, not so bad. And I'll retouch on this point. That's really important. And if any of you actually end up running into these issues where governments are talking about eliminating parrot populations, etc., most naturalized parrots living in urban areas have no negative impacts on the ecosystem or on human society, in part because they're in urban environments. I think this is Caracas, Venezuela, in the middle, where there are blue and yellows flying around, but they're also in Miami. Almost all the negative impacts are either by monk parakeets or ringneck parakeets. But even most of these parakeet populations, there's really little to no evidence that they're having negative impacts. My European colleagues would be unhappy with me because there are a lot of ringneck parakeets kind of rolling over the continent of Europe and through the UK. And those really should be watched because, yeah, going forward, there may be more impacts as there get to be more and more of them, or these birds just may fit in nicely. It's really hard to say. When are negative ecological impacts most likely? If you have endangered cavity nesters, things that actually need cavities in urban areas, your Indian ringnecks may cause some trouble. If naturalized parrots start to spread beyond the urban areas, then that's different. Then they would be have the potential to run into a lot more species and cause a lot more damage. So watching for that, I think, is important. I'm not excited about letting them loose on islands with endangered native parrot species, especially if those native species are found only on those islands. It's probably best to leave our naturalized parrots elsewhere. Again, unconfirmed to date, but still worrisome. They could hybridize, there could be disease, there could be competition, and all of these just get more likely if you're stuck on a little tiny island together. Ringneck parakeets are the most likely to cause damage. If you have a breeding colony, please don't let them escape. I know that hurricanes happen, but do your best to not let out breeding colonies of ringneck parakeets. That could certainly cause some trouble. Should naturalized parrots be controlled to reduce economic impacts? The key issue here for me is that it costs a lot of money to do a control campaign. So agricultural areas near urban areas and electrical infrastructure can be at risk. Not always, but they can be at risk. From what I've seen, and again, not everything gets published, but most costs are relatively low compared to the total income of the organization involved, and compared to the impacts from other species. So again, would you be better off trapping squirrels or trapping parakeets? Monk parakeets are the most economically damaging in the United States. So again, if you are a responsible pet owner and have monk parakeets, again, don't allow breeding colonies of monk parakeets to escape. And individual pets, obviously, I'm sure few of you want your parrots to escape as members of this esteemed Phoenix Landing organization. But minimizing releases and escapes is good for the reputation of the aviculture community at the very least. And what should society do? One of the key things to think about is how much are these parakeets costing us? And how much does it cost to control them? If the cost of control is greater than the cost of damage, is this the right thing to do? And that's kind of, those are the types of dialogues I would like to see. Because the ecological and economic impacts of naturalized parrots, again, go read a Menchetti article, buy the book or try and find one online. If you can read one of those Menchetti articles, again, you finish reading it and you're like, oh my God, the sky is falling. But when we look at with my perspective, the ecological and economic impacts of these birds are probably a lot less than previously suggested. And if the economic costs are often relatively low when you put them in a broader perspective, we really, if we're going to talk about controlling these birds, a detailed and transparent cost-benefit analysis is needed. What are the real ecological impacts? What are the costs of damage incurred versus the cost of eradication and control? What's the probability of success? And then the flip side of that, what if we do nothing? Are they likely to explode to a level where the impacts really get more and more? And then, damn it, your governments have got to factor in public opinion. What do the local people want in this case? Are enough people really bothered by these parakeets that you're going to get broad public support? Are the economic impacts enough that society says, this isn't worth it? Or are these impacts so trivial that people just enjoy having the parakeets around? And the answers are not uniform. There are some places where they are not happy with the birds. They don't want them there and they want them out, and they have that right. But if your society decides that they really want them there and you as a government go after them, yeah, you may run into some trouble. And the way I think about it, and I can be very wrong, is that few, not none, few control campaigns will be warranted if the powers that be really take a close look at it and are transparent and are upfront and say, hey, this is what we're thinking. This is what's up. Naturalized parrots and the future of aviculture. Most parrot introductions come from birds moved for the pet trade. And unfortunately, the fear of parrots escaping and ravaging the landscape will continue. No matter what the data say, governments and traditionally trained wildlife biologists will see these as a priority their priority invasive species. They're blacklisted, not excited. And there's a good chance that aviculture, and I know that aviculture maybe isn't always the right word when talking to Phoenix Landing, but the owning and moving of parrots will often be blamed for naturalized parrots. And this may continue to impact the ability to own birds in the United States. The good thing is the reduction in imports, and which I'm totally in favor of, the reduction of wild-caught birds does reduce the risk of more parrot populations getting out and getting established. So owners need to prevent escapes and spread the message not to release birds. In the UK, there was a woman, a friend of Gabby's, who was taking care of a ringneck for someone for a couple months. And then and Jimi Hendrix, apparently it has been suggested, the most recent articles I've seen, that Jimi Hendrix didn't release them. But this owner, she took care of this parrot for a couple months. The parrot was a nightmare. She didn't like parrots, but they eventually came to an agreement. They enjoyed their time together. And then she somewhat reluctantly returned the parrot to the original owner. 2 weeks later, the parakeet escaped from the original owner out into the wild in a place where there were a bunch of them flying around. And the woman actually said, oh yeah, well, I was planning to release it anyhow within a couple months. And Gabby's friend rightfully like exploded. And I couldn't fathom, Gabby and I just couldn't fathom that mentality that they had this pet, they were taking care of it, but they decided they were just going to release it to be out with its buddies. And that's not, so all joking aside, that isn't responsible. It isn't the message that that parrot owners and those that share their lives with parrots should be putting forth to others. So and what other actions can aviculture take? Promote a more balanced evaluations of naturalized parrots, parrot risks and impacts. And I don't know how many of you are in an area that has the possibility of that where there are wild parrots, but if local removals are proposed, oh, sorry, Gabby's my wife. She has a PhD in parrots from Texas A&M, and she's a better parrot person than I am. She's had more birds in captivity through her life and is as much of a parrot crazy, and she knows way more about macaw and parrot chicks than I do. I'm kind of an adult ecology guy. She's more of a behavior and nesting person. Um, so if you are in a position where local removals are proposed or regulations are proposed, I would say that you have the right to say, we need a real cost benefit analysis if you're going to move forward on this. The ecological evidence may be trying to be used to justify the removal, but get the book chapter, and you should ask for the ability for there to be more input and participation by local people. And if the people who show up at the meeting are jumping up and down saying, kill the parrots, kill the parrots, kill the parrots, well, then maybe that's what's going to end up happening. But if the people are out there signing petitions saying, please, we love our parrots, don't kill them, well, then let's help make that prevail. Or the other thing is, Brightsmith is occasionally available as a consultant if it gets too serious and you want some extra support on that. So, and I did use information from this review in Wisconsin in August 2020. I talked to the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources as they reviewed the status of monk parakeets. They were considered illegal to breed, own, and sell, but the recommendation was the committee was still considered invasive. Pet ownership allowed as new pets pose little risk. However, breeding and selling, I think, were still considered illegal. But they did understand as a committee, and I don't know what the law ended up as, but they did understand as a committee that these non-wild caught pets really aren't likely to cause much of a damage. So I think I got through to a lot of the people on the committee. Again, not certain how it played out at the end, but balanced review of the evidence can help create more balanced regulations as well. Issues complex. Most naturalized parrots aren't a major threat in most areas. So my summary is, it's hard for me to agree with this Menchetti statement of naturalized parakeets have begun to exert serious problems to native environments, wildlife, and humans. I was like, what literature is he reading that I couldn't find? And the funniest thing was, I sent him my chapter to this guy before I published it, and he had like no comments on it. He sent it back to me and said, you missed these 3 references, here they are. But I totally contradicted his entire body of work, and he didn't comment on that, and it weirded me out. So I know he read it because he found references I was missing, which is a really nitpicky detail. But instead, I really suggest that here's Pruitt Jones, the guy who edited the book, that naturalized parrots have not lived up to the dire forecasts of large-scale environmental and economic impacts. And this he wrote back in 2012, and I still believe that that's where we are today as well. So thanks for the opportunity. I don't get any money from buying the book, but I'd love to see more people read it. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. For more information, there's all sorts of cool stuff in the book. And again, some of the perspectives will bother you because they kind of assume that these birds are horrible, but it's a fun read, and lots of good information in it. So with that, thanks to Anne and everybody else for joining us today, and I'm happy to take questions about Probably parrots mostly. I'd prefer to stay out of elephants and penguins for now, but yeah, whatever you'd like to chat about.
Thanks, Don. As always, you're deep into the good science and good works for birds, and we're lucky to have you on the planet. So, um, Adrian wanted to know if there were any naturalized parrots in Arkansas.
Oh, middle of the country, hard. So actually, one of the funniest things that I didn't really get into is when you look at where the parrots are, there a lot of them are near the big importation ports. So the places where parrots came into the United States when they were being trafficked legally, the big Port of Los Angeles, Port of Miami. I heard people talking about the Port of New York, and then crossing the border up from Mexico. Those are main spots where they got started. There's your map. Forgive me if I don't know what the counties in Arkansas look like, because this is a county-based map. But not much in the middle. But there's plenty of take a trip. I actually did a parrot watching trip myself, going down to South Florida, and it can be fun if you go to the right spots.
Yeah, we read a lot about the red lord Amazons in California and Texas, red crowns, I guess. What other Amazons are becoming more prolific in the South?
So along the border in Mexico, in Brownsville, there are some spots that have a few yellow-headed, so Oratrix, double yellowheads.
Mhm.
Then in Texas, there's also a few lilac crowns, but for the uninitiated, they're hard to tell from red crown from green cheeks. If you get down into Miami, God knows.
Mm.
If you look, there are ways to find where the birds are being seen. eBird is the easiest one to use. So you can go to eBird and start looking at where birds have been seen, and you can find where people have actually been seeing the parrots, and go to those locations and look for them.
Mhm.
Monks obviously are around, and then in California, SoCal Parrot
Mhm.
is the organization that's working with those birds. They might have a clue as to where those, and eBird would also show you where they're roosting, but that'll be a mix of lilacs and red crowns. And then you're likely to have other things thrown in. Um, Telegraph Hill still should have some Aratingas, some conures, but South Florida still wins. Um, but if you're near any of those monk parakeet spots, you can certainly keep an eye out for, like, Austin, Texas has got them, Houston's got them, the New York area. So a lot of people live relatively close to where you can find monk parakeets.
But no blue fronts. I know SoCal has helped with confiscated blue fronts, but no blue front yet.
Yeah, I've not heard, and I'd have to check eBird to go through what to find where.
Mhm.
There are red crowns in Miami, but they're not doing as well as, crap, I can't remember which species it is.
Well, blue and golds are doing.
Orange wing. No, there's an
Oh,
Amazon in
oh, there's another
there's
one.
an Amazon in Miami-Dade County that's doing well. I just can't remember offhand which one it is right now.
Mhm. Oh, before I forget, if there are IAABC members today, let's think of a fly free as your code. Email me, say fly free, and I'll tell you how to get your continuing education units. So Don, you do so many things. Where to start? I think one of your most interesting and effective is going to be the Parrot Release Network. You want to tell everybody
Mm.
what that's about?
So that's pretty cool. Yeah, so it's funny here we're talking about naturalized parrots, and then we're talking about releasing parrots. But the Parrot Release Network is an organization that was born last August, and it's got professionals from throughout Latin America mostly, who actually work in the rehabilitation and release of native parrots, throughout the Latin America. And we're really excited about that because there just aren't many scientists working on how to make release better. So one of the big problems is Amazon parrots will be confiscated in places like Costa Rica or Peru, and they're sent to a rescue center. But if they have, or people will get tired of them, or the problem is grandma dies and the kids don't want or know what to do with the parrot, and they'll bring it to a rescue center. And those birds, as you know, live a very long time, and they just start to clog up these rescue centers. And the rescue centers basically just get overwhelmed. And if there's no place to put these birds, the authorities may not confiscate illegal birds, and it all starts to shut down. So one of the ways to handle that is if you can release them into the wild, then you can free up space. But how do you release them into the wild? And the success rates can be insanely low on a lot of these birds. And so you'll get birds that are just going out and dying, or the people will just say, this bird is unreleasable. And everybody has a different definition for unreleasable, but unreleasable may, in some instances, it's just because a bird talks, they'll say we can't release it. Others say, no, it likes people or it walks on the ground, and then these birds just start gumming up the system. So what we're doing with the Parrot Release Network is we're bringing all of these people together, and we've had really cool online discussions. It's a WhatsApp group in which they'll say, man, is it bad to release a parrot that speaks? And we had people from about 5 different countries come back and say, no, we've released birds that have done this and they were successful, or we had this problem, or this worked. And now, instead of being everybody solving their problems isolated, like there's a guy in Colombia, but he's the only one doing it. There's a big center in Costa Rica, then there's a whole bunch of places in Brazil. But even within Brazil, they may not be communicating well. So this upping the communication and bringing everybody together seems to be really helpful. And we're going to do a big conference in Honduras next year, and try and get more information out about, allow these people to communicate and then do good science. So we're also doing research on parrot release at this point, my group, and we've probably got 3 or 4 different topics that we're looking at to try and help allow more of these birds to get back into the wild where it's appropriate.
And you've been doing it so much longer than most of these folks. You bring so much experience to the table. I mean, most of us learned about you from your work at Tambopata in the research center in Peru. And that was, one of the earliest conservation efforts I was ever familiar with. So now you're working in a different way in Peru. You want to tell everybody what you're doing
Yeah,
there?
so in Peru, we're going to be relaunching some work, now looking at some of our old data, combining that with new data in order to look at how climate change is impacting the tropical forests of southeastern Peru, and any kick-on effects that may have on the survival and breeding of parrots down there. So we're pretty excited about that. That should start up sometime late summer or fall.
And having met some of the remaining Chicos, as they were called, the ones who used to come in and steal our pancakes at Tampa. Now that you're not there anymore, do you have any idea how that group of birds that you knew so well is doing?
I think so. Gabby we send crews up there now and then, and we will be, with this research, we'll be going back through the same site. The numbers have definitely dropped, but there's still a few of them around, and we've got a pretty good idea of how long they survived. And that's one of our first reintroduction papers or release papers was based on those birds. So they have contributed to science. For certain, as well as contributed to stealing pancakes and a lot of really good photo ops down in Peru.
I wonder if they're still welcome at the lodges there, like they were. It's hard to. Do you ever hear from anybody?
They're still go flying in and out of the lodges. Yeah, because we've been sending up research teams every year for the past few years, and we'll go through. We have permission to work in the site still because our research permits predate the lodge permits. So yeah, and I saw a pair last year sitting up in the rafters, and Gabby ID'd them for me. So yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, the Fresius project. We actually wrote about the first paper I had was on the work of the Fresius, and I worked with them as well. Yep.
We used to be their conduit for donations way back
I hear you.
when they were still alive. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, that whole facility is not there anymore. So
Yep, but now it has spawned a variety of interesting and
Yes,
successful projects. So,
yes, yes, it
so as
has.
far as genetics go, genetic samples are tough for a variety of reasons, including legal reasons. And I haven't done as much with the genetics as I might, but there are people who are, George Olah among them, who are pulling together different issues with the genetics and looking at it.
And then of course you wear so many different hats as a professor at Texas A&M. You have a lot of projects going on there as well, right? Research wise.
So our research is focusing in Costa Rica right now is my biggest research project, which is this parrot release stuff that's going on. But we also have a release project going on in Brazil. I'm associated with a release project in Colombia as well. And I've got a graduate student whose work, part of my lab is working on developing cameras that can collect data on temperature, humidity, photographs, and movement inside bird nests, inside cavity nests. And hopefully the project manager on that they've launched a company and they're probably going to be releasing commercial products within a year or so, which may allow people to better monitor what's going on in captive parrot nests and wild parrot nests as well. And monitoring other fauna as well. So yeah, there's a bunch of things going on there as well.
Are you still involved in nutrition studies, which of course
So funny you should ask. We are now working with Harrison's, and Harrison's is providing support for our Peru work, and also we're working together on some hand testing diets for them in captive parrots. So captive parrot diet stuff is happening, and we haven't formalized the plan yet, but we'll probably be looking at some more wild diet stuff in Peru as we relaunch, because our phenologist, our tree expert's going to be going back out into the wild, and we're going to be looking at trees again. So, and with the support of Harrison's, we'll probably try and get some more information on parrot diet stuff.
is that the new Harrison's Foundation that was just, is it the foundation side of Harrison's?
It should be,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, we've been talking about things I haven't heard anything recent. Maybe I'm missing something, but yes, we've been working with them.
That's great. Well, I always appreciated all your nutrition studies, as you know. I think you were leading the pack in so many ways. Yeah, well, that's great. And you have such a huge database of information from your work there before. I'm sure that's going to be.
Yeah, that's going to provide the context and allow us to look at how things change from year to year and what might be driving that. Charlotte's asking something. Do people know anything about how parrots who speak do as parents? Parrots as parents. The short answer to that is no, but there is evidence of successful breeding of parents, yes, of parrots breeding successfully, even ones that can speak. The studies that need to be done that I don't think have been done is when you take these birds that speak, how do they change their vocabulary? How do they change their vocalizations as they integrate into the wild? And the place we're working right now is mostly released birds, so we don't really know what they're coming to as a dialogue. And these are yellow napes, so they have a really well-defined dialects and things. The funniest thing was Tim Wright, who is the expert, one of the experts, he leads the lab on analysis of the vocabulary of these yellow napes. He recorded some birds at our release site, which is all non-native, all released birds. He said he got some vocalizations that when he scanned them came up as being from Guatemala.
Wow.
And there's no way that birds were moved from Guatemala. That is not a possibility. But what he was suggesting, and he hasn't been able to really research this, but that one anecdote was like, wow, these birds are just coming up with whatever. And it turns out that this one bird speaks Guatemalan, raised in captivity in Costa Rica, because he's had such a weird raising, and he's interacted at different times of his life with different subsets of birds that may also have come out of captivity. So things just go bonkers. But I imagine that we may be developing our own dialect in this released population, and how that differs from the wild populations is certainly would be fun to look at in more detail.
Yeah. Well, as you know, I'm always audio recording when I go somewhere with the green wings, because I like to come back and play it for my green wings, and they don't speak Brazilian dialect, but they love the Peru dialect. They respond to it.
That's weird.
It
Huh.
is weird. Yeah.
Huh.
Last time we were with you at the Clay Licks in Peru was the recording that they most respond to. So
Huh.
who knows?
How many different locations do you have recordings from?
Well, Brazil several times, Peru, a little bit of Costa Rica, but there aren't any green wings in Costa Rica, so
Right. Huh.
I wasn't as
Okay.
inspired.
Yeah,
But
keep
yeah,
recording green wings anywhere you go. Curate that collection. It might become useful to someone
okay.
at some point. So
And of course,
cool.
all the valuable samples of nuts that I confiscate through
There
customs
you go.
when I travel with you and other. Do they eat this? Do they eat that? Yeah. Um, any other projects you're doing you want people to know about and maybe support?
Uh, yeah. So the best way to link into where we are is the Macaw Society on Facebook, and that kind of keeps pushing out where we are. There are possibilities to come and visit us in Costa Rica as a short-term volunteer. It's not an easy spot to walk around. Charlotte can let you know
For
about
that,
that.
yeah.
But it's a great project that's going on. We're also trying to do one other cool thing, which is associated with the Parrot Release Network, is we're trying to get a lot of unpublished information. So those really good reports that people like Laura Kim Joyner write, but doesn't have the chance to actually publish these private reports, and give us permission. We're looking to post them through Texas A&M in a place that's going to be indexed by Google and Google Scholar. So if you go in and start searching the web for diet green-winged macaw, you may come up with information that we've found and are publishing online. So we're doing a little fundraising for that as well, to try and get enough money to pay some staff time to collect up these really valuable articles that are basically lost, reports that otherwise would be lost, and get them into a place where they'll be forever available on the internet. Because we know so little about these birds in many instances, but there's a lot of work that's been done and then just dies and never gets out. So we want to address that problem, and we're working on that. We now have the permission to make a first draft of that, and we're going to be working on that over the next couple months, and hopefully before the fall, or right around early fall, we should have a mock-up of that we'll start sending out in order to generate some funds so we can get more things put online.
Oh, what a laudable effort that is. That would be so.
Just say no to big scientific publishing. down with Elsevier and
Oh
all of
yeah, they do
those
make it
money
complicated.
machines.
Yes, they do.
So
Oh my goodness. Well, any other questions or anything else, Don, you want to share today? You have
anything else out of the peanut gallery?
been.
There were a lot of comments earlier on. If I missed anything, let me know.
Yeah, it was a good chat today. It was a very hearty chat. And some really good folks with us today. So,
Yeah. Lots of people always talk behind my back, so I'm sure that's what inspired everyone.
no, there's
So
actually a lot of experience here today, I think. So,
cool.
well, we're always super grateful for everything you
Is
do.
your work at Punta Islita or the other location? We are at a different location. It's near Jicaral. It's near Jicaral, so it's not far from Punta Islita as the macaw flies, but it is a different country, a different site for certain.
Yeah.
And let's see, I can put out. I'm horrible on email,
Yeah, don't
but I
trust
will.
an email. Yeah. I
I
can vouch
will,
for that.
and so can Frank. I just replied to a
Oh,
message to
good.
Frank that
Thank
he
you.
sent me in May. There it is. Oops, that only went to hosts and panelists. I'm sorry. Everyone. Oh God, it's not
Maybe you
copied.
should give them Gabby's email instead, huh?
I don't know if Gabby wants.
To
It
be in,
depends.
yeah.
But yeah, actually, if you're interested in trying to go to visit or volunteer anything, it's VVGO.
Just go to the Macaw Society website. I think that's a good start.
Yep. Yeah, there's a lot of information on. Okay, gvigo cvm.tamil.edu is an option, or the Tamu. I can probably find that
That's
that
okay.
web page pretty easily. So yeah, that'll be a good one, and you can hook up with us through the web page or through Facebook.
Mhm.
So
All
read
right.
about the Parrot Release Network as well there. So
Yes, definitely the Parrot Release Network. I hope that's just going to get bigger and stronger and
we've gotten a
benefit
few
so many.
people out of Europe. I think we've got a couple people now out of Africa. So yeah, and the fun thing is we're going for multilingual. So as of now, people will post in English or Spanish, and people will reply in English or Spanish. We get some Portuguese every now and then. So we're trying to be really international and welcoming on that. We haven't had any posts in French, but if we get them, we'll just use Google Translate and move on. So.
And the conference you have coming up this year, the second one is online for all the scientists involved, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not certain. We'll probably do some events online this year. I haven't decided yet, but there is a real conference in Honduras next year at Copan Ruinas in end of June 2025. Copan Ruinas, Honduras. I imagine the event will be bilingual, but with a lot of Spanish. So
Sounds good. All right. Thanks everybody for being here on a Saturday, a cooler Saturday at least, finally. And thank you, Don, for all you do, always and forever.
Thank you, Cher, on that one. We are actually we're working with a couple different options for estate planning. We're trying to figure out if we can do estate planning that includes birds, if we can accept birds as part of an end of life agreement, but certainly for other estate planning, A&M is really building with the Boyd Endowment is not up and running yet, but it's very close. And it looks like that's going to be set up very well. We have the Schubot Endowment. We are trying to build kind of a cluster of bird-related funding sources that are forever funding sources that will allow A&M to continue to really be leaders in this field and do the type of research that's important to people like you, who are interested in the conservation and health and welfare and diets, et cetera, of these birds. So certainly keep us in mind and let me know if that's something of interest to you, because I've got all the connections and we're working on what may turn out to be a third agreement at this point. And I think making this into a cluster so that the university keeps the best people working on these topics is key. So that's a funny looking green wing you have in your picture. I just wanted to let you know that on your background.
Oh, yeah.
This must be one of those mutated ones.
Yeah, this is my naturalized ringneck. Here we go.
Ah, there you go. Why did it take so long for him to
I don't
appear?
know.
Come on, get with the program.
Don helped us create our very first trip to Brazil way back when, and this picture was taken on that trip by
Sweet.
Kevin. Yeah.
Cool.
So I thought it was just a nice memory to have today with you.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So
okay. Thanks to all. Thanks to Phoenix Landing. Thanks, Anne. And thanks for all of you for listening.
Absolutely. You're the best. We couldn't. Parrots need you.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye, everybody. See you on
Bye-bye.
August 10th, hopefully, for a behavior class on screaming. Natural behavior. Okay.
I can scream.
How to deal with natural behaviors in our homes is always the challenge, right? So
Take
anyway,
care.
thanks. Bye.
Bye bye.